Every village has one. The young man who is always almost ready, almost starting, almost changing. Tomorrow, he says. Always tomorrow. In this particular village, nestled between banana plantations and the wide brown-shouldered Magdalena River in the Colombian interior, mornings arrived with a heat that demanded movement. Farmers were already knee-deep in the soil before the sun cleared the tree line. Women fanned charcoal beneath clay pots of changua and arepa, the smell of warm milk and fresh corn drifting through open doorways before the birds had finished their first conversation of the day. Mule carts moved slowly along red dirt roads, loaded with plantain and yucca, heading toward the market 2 villages over. And Camilo sat in his hammock. The same hammock, strung between the same 2 guadua poles under the same mango tree at the edge of his mother's yard, one leg hanging over the side, swaying gently, watching the whole purposeful world move past him like the river he had never once bothered to cross. He wasn't a bad man. He wasn't without talent. He was simply comfortable in a way that was slowly, quietly eating him alive, one golden, wasted afternoon at a time. Then, one Friday morning, the village woke up singing. Valentina was getting married. Valentina, whom Camilo had loved since they were children, stealing mangoes from Don Aurelio's trees and running barefoot across the hot red earth laughing. Valentina, who had believed in him longer than anyone had a right to, who had sat beside him in that hammock on enough evenings, waiting for him to become the man she already saw inside him. She was marrying Esteban, a man from upriver, serious, broad-chested, the kind of man whose hands were permanently calloused from honest work, who had built his own farmhouse before he was 25, who crossed the Magdalena every single morning before dawn to tend his crops on the other bank without complaint or ceremony. Camilo heard the news from his cousin, who mentioned it between bites of pan de bono, as casually as mentioning the weather. He walked toward the village square anyway, as though his feet needed to confirm what his heart already knew. And there they were. Valentina in a white cotton dress with yellow embroidery at the collar, her dark hair pinned with a small maracuya flower, laughing at something Esteban had said. Her laugh, that particular laugh Camilo had heard 1,000 times, sounding different now, lighter, free of something heavy she had been carrying for years. She looked up and found him standing at the edge of the square. Her expression didn't harden. It didn't soften either. It simply settled, the way the river settles after a stone has passed through it and the ripples have finished and the surface has returned to itself, complete, undisturbed. He turned and walked back the way he came. Behind him, an old woman's voice carried clearly across the square. Ese muchacho, what did he think? That love waits forever while a man sleeps in his hammock? Nobody disagreed. Nobody needed to. The truth, when it has been true for long enough, stops needing defense. It just stands there in the open air, patient and immovable, waiting for you to finally look at it directly. He sat alone that evening at the riverbank, the real one, the wide one, where the Magdalena moved with that deep, indifferent power it always carried in the rainy season, brown and heavy and unstoppable, pushing everything downstream without apology. Across the water, the far bank was a dark green line of trees. Beyond it, somewhere, another life, a different version of things. He had looked at that far bank 1,000 times and never once felt the need to reach it. He felt it now. The shame sat in his chest like wet clay, heavy, shapeless, impossible to ignore. For the first time in his 24 years, tomorrow offered him no comfort. because tomorrow had already arrived. It had arrived wearing yellow embroidery and a maracuya flower, and walked away holding a better man's hand. People speak about motivation like it is something that visits you gently, a breeze through a window, a song that catches you at the right moment and lifts you forward. But Camilo had waited for that breeze his entire life, and it had never come. What came instead was this pain so total, so undeniable, so deeply his own fault, that staying the same suddenly became more unbearable than any effort changing could ever demand. He sat with that pain on the muddy bank until it stopped feeling like grief and started feeling like fuel. Then he stood up, wiped the red dirt from his trousers, and walked toward the old wooden dock downstream. He had no destination, no plan, just the absolute, bone-deep certainty that the hammock under the mango tree was no longer an option. At the dock, an old lanchero, one of the riverboatmen who had been ferrying people and cargo across the Magdalena his entire life, sat in a wide, flat wooden boat, oars resting in his weathered hands, in no particular hurry about anything. He told Camilo the crossing took about an hour, always had this time of year. The Magdalena was running full and strong from the rains upriver. You had to respect it, he said. Work with it, not against it. Slow and steady, that's how the river was crossed. Camilo looked at the far bank. Then he looked at the oars. Then he stepped into the boat and reached for them without a word. And he rowed. Not with patience, not with the quiet respect the old lanchero had counseled. He rowed the way a man rows when everything he has ever postponed has finally arrived at the same moment and demanded payment in full. The way a man rows when he can still hear that laugh sounding lighter than it ever sounded for him. The Magdalena pushed back, cold and heavy and completely indifferent to his reasons, and he answered it with everything inside him that had been lying unused in a hammock for years. His palms split against the rough oar handles. His shoulders burned. His breath came in ragged pulls across the wide brown water. The far bank seemed to move no closer, and still he pulled, and pulled, and pulled again. The river didn't care about his heartbreak. It didn't soften for his desperation. It simply pushed, and he simply answered. 20 minutes later, the hull ground against the far muddy bank. The old lanchero sat completely still in the stern, staring at Camilo with an expression that moved slowly from alarm to something closer to wonder. Camilo dropped the oars, sat there with his chest heaving and his hands bleeding and his soaked trousers plastered to his legs. The jungle insect sang over the water. A great white egret stood motionless in the shallows nearby, unbothered. For the first time in years, he felt entirely, completely awake. He had crossed in 20 minutes what had always taken an hour. Not because he had become someone new overnight, but because for the first time in his life, he was carrying a reason that left absolutely no room for anything less than everything. The old lanchero spoke quietly from the stern. "Muchacho," he said, "I have crossed this river 10,000 times. I have never seen that before." Camilo looked back at the far bank, at the village, the mango tree, the hammock he could no longer see but could still feel, and said nothing. There was nothing left to say to that shore. There is a hammock waiting for all of us, and there is a wide river we have been staring at from the bank, telling ourselves we will cross it when we feel ready, when the current is calmer, when life arranges itself into something more convenient and the moment finally feels right. But readiness almost never comes before movement. It comes through it. Your heartbreak, your failure, the moment you stood at the edge of the square and watched your own future walk away, that does not have to be where your story ends. Sometimes life takes something from you specifically to put the oars in your hands, to finally give you a reason strong enough to make staying still more painful than moving forward. The Magdalena will push back, your palms will hurt, you will not look graceful, but you will reach the other bank. And when you do, you will understand something the old lanchero already knew. The river was never the obstacle. The hammock was. If this story brought you clarity, leave a thought in the comments. I read every one. Like, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe for more stories like this. Keep moving forward and let your hardest moments become your greatest strength.